Welcome to part 2 of the comparison video of Autodesk Maya and Blender. Where we last left off was the usage of Maya and Blender in the 3D industry. I forgot to actually give a verdict of which one is better. It is unanimously agreed by pretty much everyone that Autodesk Maya gets the point for usage as it is used and proven in the media industry. This comes upon our next section now, which is UV mapping and texturing. You will have to bear with me because this is 2017 version of Maya. I've never used this one yet. I've only used the previous versions. So how UV mapping is done in this is probably different. But I cannot confirm. I mean, I've only just downloaded 2017 like a couple of days ago, just for the purpose of tutorial videos in the future. So what we're going to do is we are going to actually bring in a cylinder for this one. And we're going to keep it as it is. Nice cylinder there. As we got our cylinder selected, we can go up to where it says UV. And you got your UV editor. This is how it looks. Very basic UV unwrap, which is not bad. But you also have other ways. You can do a cylindrical UV map. So if I probably go to the UV editor now, you can see it like that. But we're gonna undo that. Let's just get rid of that for now. Okay. So again, if I went back to the UV editor, as we got a basic, there are different ways you can actually generate a UV editor. You got automatic, which creates it like so. As you can see, our UV editor, that's what happens when you use the automatic. There are many other ways. You can do a best plane texturing tool, camera based, which allows you to capture it exactly as you see it through the 3D perspective. Well, we're gonna, oops, get out of here. The UV editor in Blender is not so different to an extent. The only difference is that if I went to the UV editor for this now, by clicking on this tab, then going to UV image, then I go into edit mode, I cannot see the UV map here. Not unless I go to unwrap. But it unwraps it like that, and that is not what we want. If you go to smart UV unwrap, it unwraps like that. And that is not the same as if I unwrap the cube here. And I took that into the UV editor. As you can see, it's completely different how they are set up. Blender does not give you a default UV map for any of their objects. But you can also create things like that. Project from view, just like in Autodesk Maya. When it comes to texturing, obviously all objects need textures, and they all need the UV map for that. Blender has a node editor where you can create your own textures by going on inputs, as long as the object actually has a material available. You can add your inputs and stuff like that. Like for example, I'll just say use nodes. The closest thing I know to a editor in terms of texture editing in Maya is the hypershade. And in all honesty, I do not know how to get to hypershade from this section here, which is one of my downsides to using Maya. I know how to use Maya, but it's just finding all the things that you need. For example, I first found my hypershade, and this is basically where you can create your own textures for objects. Just in your thing. There are other places you can do it as well, like the node editor, though I actually don't know how to access the node editor in this version. How I found a hypershade was it was in my rendering section here. But as for the node editor in Maya, oh, it's right there. This is another way how you can create textures in your in it. So it's no different to Blender's node editor. I mean, they probably do work the same way, because even game engines like Unity and Unreal Engine 4 has a node editor for the materials and textures. So when it comes to node editor, because I can't give a definitive answer which one is better for the texturing or UV mapping, but I would say that I would give the point to Autodesk Maya, on the basis that it's all its objects that you add in are already has a default UV map, something that the Blender does not have. Comes to my next point, smoothing. For those who don't know what smoothing is, that is when you make the object appear more smooth like. Just like in Blender, we're just going to use a cube for this experiment. We have this cube here, and if I smooth this object by pressing the 3, it has been smoothed like so. If I smooth something in Blender, you get something like that. Now smooth, to make it look better, just like what we're going to do in Autodesk Maya, we're going to add in some more edges or vertices, however you like to call them. To do that in Blender, hold down the Control R, and you can just drag these along to the edges like so. Not all the way to the edges, just enough. Oops. I mean, there is an easy way how I could do this. Instead of just doing it individually, like I'm doing here, I could just go like that, grab another one, do that, then just scale them up to the edges. And as you can see, it gives that illusion that the edge of the cube is actually smoothing off. We're going to do the same thing to the cube in Maya. So we're going to go primarily on the edges. We're going to go to the mesh tools, insert edge loop, and we're just going to drag that one there. We're going to do the same there, then we're going to do the same here, and the same one down there. And now we're going to need one this side, and we're going to need one this side. Okay. Now if I press 3 on that now, you got that smooth edge cube as well, which is what we wanted. So it looks nicer. There, I wouldn't say either Maya or Blender's got a better way of smoothing objects. But how you smooth objects in Maya gives you a bit more nice, smoother edges. Other things you could do when it comes to blenders is, I've got my cube as it is like that. I can just add in a modifier, which is subdivision service, and that can just add in a bit more. Just to smooth the edges a bit more, if I wanted to. You can do the same thing in Maya, but I believe Maya's smoothing is more of it's reasonable enough. So I'll give a point of smoothing to Maya because it has a better smoothing than what Blender has, from my perspective. Comes to a point 7, which is rendering. Now, Blender has by default 3 renderers: Blender's internal render, Blender's cycle render, and Blender's game engine. Each one has a different material setup. I will not be doing any rendering in here, but rendering in Blender is more control friendly in terms of setting things up. You can even change the output, compression, and color and depth, sample blur. All this can be done in Maya, just not like, but generally these settings are done after this system. Just like in Maya, a camera is needed to render out something. Now Maya, depending on which version you've got, depends on which one you use. I mean, if you've got a student version of 2016, you can get a mental ray renderer, which is a good renderer. In 2017, mental ray has been removed. Instead, they have replaced it with Arnold, which is a good renderer. It's been used in movies and animated movies. I'm just trying to think, what was the one movie that I remember watching that used Arnold? I'm sure it'll come to me soon. But there is no doubt that with that certain renderers have better effects. I mean, I have used Blender's internal render, and I've used Cycle's render, and Cycle render gives out better looks. But if I have not actually used Arnold to its full potential, but seeing what Arnold can do in terms on the big screens in TV, I would say that Maya would win that comparison in terms of renderers. I mean, you can get a lot of renderers from Maya, including besides Mental Ray and Arnold, you can get Octane, you can get RenderMan. Blender, you can get renderers like Lux Render. You can also get Octane for Blender, but you can also get RenderMan for Blender as well. So it's a very hard choice. It depends to determine which run can be better. I would probably say that because Blender is an open source, you can put a lot more things in Blender without any restriction. So I would probably have to give, in terms of rendering, in terms of quantity, to Blender. But when it comes to quality, I would say that Maya would win on quality. So I'll say I'll give that a tie with those two. Now, one we're actually going to now is game engines. Blender for quite some time now has always came with the Blender game engine. And the Blender game engine allows you to do many things, from making interactive scenery to obviously making your own commercial video games and stuff like that. For example, you got your players here, your AA samplings, shading. There is no limit of what the quality of a game in Blender, in the Blender game engine, can be, besides how good your computer is, how good your textures are, and how good you are at animating and programming. You can get certain special effects in the Blender game engine as well, like screen space ambient occlusion, high dynamic range, motion blur, depth of fields, everything that you get in other game engine. However, though, those features are not native to the Blender game engine. When I say native, I mean they are not already in the game engine. You have to download them separately from third parties. Autodesk Maya, back before, well, a couple of years ago, did not have a game engine. Even this version does not have a game engine. However, with Autodesk's acquisition of BitSquid, its game engine, which is now called Stingray, I'd say that both game engine, both Maya and Blender has a game engine. Stingray, however, is installed separately, but it can be set in the workflow of Autodesk Maya, so you can easily transition from both, import and export objects from both. So, and Stingray does, from what I understand, have screen space ambient occlusion, real-time reflections from looks on the images and videos that may probably be in competition with the Unreal Engine 4 and Unity. I mean, I use Blender Game Engine for some test demonstrations for video games, but I cannot show Stingray on the basis that I don't have Stingray installed on my computer. I was going to install it, but for some reason my installer just doesn't want to work for me, so I can't give Stingray a proper look. But with rumours and actual possibilities of the Blender game engine being removed from Blender when the 2.8 versions come out, they are probably replacing it with something called interaction mode or interactive mode. That kills the idea of a Blender game engine being a game engine. So with that in mind, Autodesk Maya would get a point for this, because Stingray is their latest acquisition, so therefore it's got a long life ahead of it, and with more features than the Blender game engine present in it, and it's already been used for video games in the past, like Dead Island Escape, which is on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3. Then, in comparison with the Blender game engine that's got no titles on consoles, I would say, yeah, Autodesk Maya would win this one. We're gonna go to support. When I say support, it's not so much of what you can get from in the game engine or the 3D program or anything like that. But when I say support, I mean where to go to when there are problems. For Autodesk Maya, you do have links to tutorials. You do have learning paths. You do have different things in it to tell you what's new, what's it about, Maya's homepage, and everything like that. And you do get a support page on Autodesk, which allows you to ask questions and they will answer back. I'd say you probably get a more professional answer from the Autodesk forums than you would from forums for Blender, like blenderartist.org or .com. Most of Blender's help comes on the user community, developer community, and the Blender websites and things like that. Although Blender has a more wide range of places to go and ask for help in terms of software or the problems with Blender. Unlike Maya, Blender can be quite unreliable in terms of problems. I mean, because most of the things that is made with Blender come from the development community, which is pretty much anyone because of the general public license, it's not easy to pinpoint any problems with the software because it could be down to what add-ons you added onto it, what you're trying to do, and things like that. With Maya, obviously, I have had many times where Autodesk Maya has crashed on me, but I know that when it comes to problems, I know that if I can get a post out to the Autodesk forums, I know that I'm gonna get a good answer back. Because most people, from personal experience of asking questions on Blender's forums, most people ask, can you send us a file or images to see the problem? Understandable. But sometimes the problem cannot be solved by an image. And it's better to go and ask someone who actually knows their software than it is to ask someone who uses it. So, in terms of support, you got a more quantity for Blender, but you probably get a more accurate and qualitative response from Autodesk. So again, Autodesk would win this one. Hotkeys. This is going to be an interesting one. I don't know all the hotkeys in Maya, but I know there are a few. So we've got the cylinder. Obviously the hotkeys do show up when you look on things here. I mean, the move tool is your W. Q is just a select. Or select tool. W is your hotkey for move. E is for your rotation. And R is for your scale. For Blender, the hotkeys for moving is your G. Rotation is R. And your scaling is S. Now what's the difference between these two is that, unlike in Maya, when you press the hotkeys, it doesn't automatically put it into any motion like in Blender. It just selects hotkeys to that. In Blender, if I use the move key, which is the G key, which is probably what I would call the grab, allows you to move it as soon as you press it. You can also press the G key and the X key to move it on that axis. Just like G and Y to move on the Y, and G and Z to go up and down. Extrusion when it comes to extruding objects, for example with this, I can just press the E key and it extrudes it out. In Autodesk Maya, if I select a face like that, I can just press the Control E and I can also extrude like so. But I do feel that the answer of which one's got the better hotkeys would probably be based on my preferences and experience, and I'll say that Blender gets the point for hotkeys because they seem to be more understanding of where they are. I mean, G for grab, S for scale, R for rotation, E to extrude, and there's just so many that you can do in Blender in terms of with the hotkeys. I will leave this video there. There are two more points that I've got to go through, which I will go through in the last video. And I will catch you guys in that next video.